The Storm Age by Seran Demiral. Chapter 1, Quarantine. And there was nothing left behind of them. The first sentence of the book is the important, and for a long time I've wanted to have a book that I could leave behind. Not to be a writer or to be famous or for people to remember me, and not at all for them to know who I was. In the past, I could have thought of these things, but right now it doesn't even cross my mind. I don't think anyone but me is even attempting at this, because there's been a war going on for a long time now, and no one's doing any writing or drawing. You might say, what's the big deal? Human history is filled with wars. And I could give you two separate answers to that. This is our war, and this is the reason why it should be in history books. Of course, if in the future there will be history books and generations to read them. My second answer explains everything actually. The events we live through aren't normal at all. We live in a time of catastrophe that the people who lived in the past did not see, and for people to be able to live in the future shouldn't see. I'm so very afraid. I'm beginning to think we'll be going extinct, but I can never talk about it because of the intensity of my emotions. To be able to talk about it, I'd need to look at the time I'm living in with an objective eye. However, it's sadly very difficult for me to achieve this. That's why what I tell you will be like a compilation of the diaries I keep. I will narrate what I went through, the notes I've written, and sometimes adding comments. I'm sorry in advance for the confusion. You might have to put the pieces together. Well, how did I begin? There was nothing left behind of them. At least I found a sentence to start with. I'm not sure if it's interesting enough for an introductory sentence. I'm not sure if it should be interesting. This book, since it might be the last book on earth, is probably going to have a lot of interest in it. I had said I don't have an idea about the people after us, though there's no point in commenting about people in the future from the time I'm in. Whatever I say is a lie. But like I said, our situation is different from any other. I need to start from somewhere and explain. Who am I? How do I hope that while everything is disappearing, my book will stay? I could speak about those. It might be important to explain how, while everyone is disappearing, we have managed to stay alive until now. Since I don't trust my memory, I'm taking a look at my notes. According to what's written in my notebook, the day of the first big storm was exactly 47 days ago, the evening of the first day of year W's second generation. I don't know if this calendar, notebook, or book will have any meaning when it's read. The reason why I took note of it being 47 days specifically is because a period that is relevantly short in Earth time feels as long as all time when the Earth is changing. The storm in question, because scientists have named it that way, is called storm. Actually, calling it a hurricane or tornado would have been more accurate. In fact, we probably should have tried to come up with a whole new name for this extremely ferocious thing. It's so strong that it didn't leave a single thing behind. Us, however, had quarantined ourselves in a faraway area. That's how we got to witness everything. We are a bunch of scientists, a group of scientists. There used to be a global institute that we were tied to. When the world's resources started decreasing, all research units started to determine the areas that contained the things people needed. Certain areas ran out much faster, and people got to a point where they'd be all ready to kill each other for a small piece of food. Hunger. We couldn't find anything to eat. None of us could. Not a single person on earth was nourished enough. This is the reason why we were doing a series of experiments. We were trying to determine which substance would give the most energy from a small piece of itself. I don't need to speak about the scientific details, but I should try to at least say this. We were afraid of the genetically modified foods we created getting looted or stolen, or people coming to our door to try and get their hands on them, so we hid them. Yes, behind barbed wire fences. We moved to a geographically hard-to-reach area and cut our ties with the outside world, or else we wouldn't have been alive today. This is why we weren't living the storm. We were watching from afar. We didn't actually see anything firsthand. We followed from what we saw on our screens. The same way we watched the war. We were watching the storm from our screens. I think we had switched to this system just in time because our friends from other areas, I can't bring myself to say it. For a person to watch their loved ones die from afar, to be unable to do anything to keep them safe, to have their hands and feet tied is terrible, whilst real life keeps moving like a film strip a little further away from us. We were unable to do anything. We couldn't do anything. We could only send our research teams to places we knew were safe afterwards, and that's it. Even if we couldn't succeed in preserving life, we had to stay alive. In the world where we had no remaining physical relations, the only thing that was preserved during the big storm was the huge complex our building was in. The only place unaffected by everything going on in the world, quarantined, was our building where we lived with, at most, a couple hundred people. Can you imagine maybe the next generations will be coming from us? Being able to joke around in a situation like this is great. If I'd said something like this a couple of weeks ago, even joking about it would have been stupid. Now, I'm afraid the possibility of us being the last people on Earth is very high, unless there are people in places we don't know about. The storm proved to not be a one-time thing in a short time. Whenever we went into the lab to start an experiment, someone would come in and talk about the new storm, or would directly announce it and call us to watch the storm in progress. Watching the scariest thing in the world from a closed, safe, faraway place makes one feel many different emotions at once. On the one hand, knowing that we're safe was nice. We were comfortable. We were in a good mood, and even if everyone died, we'd still stay alive. We knew this was selfish, but the instinct to stay alive is very strong and makes one feel very powerful. On the other hand, we knew we were stuck in this area. Everything happened outside of our control, and we couldn't do anything but watch. Having our hands tied, unable to do anything, continuing our lives as neutral elements made our lives pointless. I think this is why, even if they never worked, we were still doing experiments. Our aim was to look like we were helping humanity, but deep down we all knew we were only trying to help ourselves. It was certain that we had become selfish. Still, we tried our best to make a difference. When one thinks they're all alone in the world, one tries to create motivations for oneself. Meanwhile, we found an actual source of motivation. Right when we had decided there was no one else left to save but ourselves. Speaking for myself, it was at that moment that changed my emotions and then my life in the long run. It was the moment my co-worker, Belize, excitedly screamed, "Marie, you have to come look at this." Witnessing the things I couldn't even begin to explain as a scientist started with that sentence, because we kept focusing on the air currents made by the storm, not the survivors. There were some people who had gone through some mutations our science could not explain and had survived. The sentence Belize had said was the turning point in my life. I will explain it as much as I can remember. "Marie, you have to come see this." This was our screen. The screen where, thanks to equipment placed in certain areas of the city's settlements by researchers that had gone to those areas earlier, we monitored all audio and visuals, moment by moment. When what I see on this screen makes me feel upset, I freeze in front of it for minutes at a time. This is probably my body's coping mechanism, to concentrate on not thinking about anything, to relax during that moment of empty-mindedness, to breathe. Only then would I be able to escape the bad feelings I'd be trapped in. It didn't happen this time. I couldn't empty my mind or stare blankly without thinking of the things on the screen. Smoke rose from the middle of the city. smoke or dust, whatever it's called. There was something floating around because of the storm. It was mesmerizing, but also frightening. From what we understood from the visuals we had slowed down was that people didn't just suddenly disappear. They slowly melted and mixed into the asphalt. To see the exact moment they died, we slowed down the videos and watched them a couple of times. The weird thing was that they died, but the opposite. The weird thing wasn't that they died, but the opposite, that a large part of people didn't die away like we thought. Their bodies had become transparent, slowly became visible again. The actions of those that got clearer became faster. Imagine bodies you thought were dead rise from a cloud of smoke and walk towards you. It's scary even through a screen. Until now, we thought a chemical inside the storm smoke killed people. But it seems either people are stronger than we had originally thought, or they have become immune to the active ingredient in the smoke. The effects of a virus might have been the point in question here. Maybe people that went through a certain sickness in the past wouldn't be affected by the virus and would just keep living. We'd do some research and find out the details. What we'd seen already had given us some hope about our own lives. At least some of us could be immune like those people. We could stay alive if we go outside. Both our motivation to keep working and our morale had increased. Of course, the visuals Belize had pointed out still felt creepy. Calling them disgusting would be more accurate, even though seeing people come out of the dust cloud alive is joyous at first. It later made me feel sick because these people's eyes shined eerily. They were like vomit green. Even though this color on its own doesn't have much effect, somehow it disgusts people. The half-transparent eyes of these people were like that. Even while we had kilometers of distance between us, watching the silhouettes instead of the real visuals of these people, creatures we could see behind their transparent eyes. The tone of that ugly green was very unsettling. It was like evil incarnate, a devious color. There, it was like there was something almost demon-like behind the eyes of those who survived the storm. I covered my mouth with my hands and slowly moved away from the screen. My friends helped me get to the bathroom by clearing out the corridor. It's not that I was going to vomit. I just needed some time to think alone. The bathroom is the perfect place for people to gather their thoughts and be alone and just think. So I made the most of my loneliness. However long I stayed in there, someone finally knocked on the door and asked if I was okay. I'm okay, there's no problem. I just needed to stay a little longer and think some more. I gathered my thoughts. Something blew, and it was part of it, and a part of it melted these people. That was scary enough. What was even scarier were the ones that got up. What happened to them? What will happen to us? I knew I couldn't get out of this on my own. I washed my face and went outside. I had to talk to my friends and my colleagues. I went back to Belize. When did you notice these events? Not very long ago, when you began working on the gases. Aaron and I wanted to take a look at the visuals. We knew we'd be faced with something, but this was not what we had expected. I mean, it's good people are alive, but they don't really look like people, do they? I think I said something no one else had said yet. I felt everyone's gaze on me. It was clear everyone in the room was listening as I spoke to Belize. I don't think they're different from us. They're just regular people who were exposed to a chemical material. I don't think we should consider them as mutated. I think we should consider that. If these people are going through a transformation, we can't establish this in 2 seconds, but I think the most logical thing is that these people mutated through the effects of a virus. What I said must have been very logical because I got all their attention. Today, I don't really care about things like that, but in that moment, it felt good to have all the attention on me. Those were the days little things mattered. We didn't know how much about the fight to live just yet. That's actually possible. He stopped. He weighed his thoughts and then continued. Well, anyway, we can't be sure it's a bad transformation. There's something going on with their eyes, but they look just like us. Maybe their actions are changing for the best. Who knows? We're so quick to think of the worst case scenario, aren't we? I think we should be more optimistic. Belize started speaking excitedly. It happens sometimes. She'll come up with an idea, get excited, hold on to it, and just go on, and we just listen patiently. What we call a mutation is just transformation, a sort of differentiation. It doesn't have to be in a bad way. Maybe these people are getting stronger. Because they survived a storm like this, they're much stronger, more resistant to hunger. After the mutation, they're turning into a new species that will stay alive. In fact, us too. I felt like I had to intervene, so I interrupted my friend just this once. Please, sweetie, please calm down. It's not our turn yet. We must be certain about what's happening first. We should stay here and understand the outside world first, and only then can we give ourselves a place in this equation. You know this. I regretted saying that. She looked a little upset. Even though we never judged her exaggerated excitement in lengthy sentences, she knew herself and we knew her, which is why she knew exactly what we were thinking without us telling her. Of course, this wasn't just because of us knowing each other. It was also because of everyone in the research team being so smart. I hope our intelligence helps us in the fight of life or death. Now, however, we must plan how we're going to work. We quickly organized a meeting. After all, we don't have a home to go back to anymore. We're all here together. Speaking of home, you've probably guessed we stay in places near our workstations. The science camp has boarding houses. The people that used to commute to the camp stay here now. Families with children, the elderly. The boarding houses have become everyone's home. Though most of the people with us are young, single, and have spent their entire lives doing research. When a person's job involves science, the people living in the outside world, parents, friends, they all become insignificant and their social lives become limited to the campgrounds. At least now we don't have to make a choice between inside or outside. I've been alone and in these grounds for as long as I can remember, and I don't have any other choice. I don't think anyone has anyone left. It's just us together. Therefore, the only thing to do is to stay in the building we're in and work with all the strength we have and someday find something that can allow us to go outside. Nothing more. When we started the meeting, the room was quite crowded. Instead of using the conference hall, we had gone to the round table so everyone could see each other. It wasn't impossible for everyone to fit in here. It was built for 20 to 25 people, and we were already 50 to 60 people inside. So we opened the speakers for the others. To make sure everyone could hear what was being said and the people outside could say what they wanted when they felt the time was right. Aaron took the floor as always. Even if no one said it, we all saw him as some sort of a leader. He was a very, very accomplished biologist. He didn't work with the lifeless molecules that made up living things. He worked with the living things themselves. I think that's where his liveliness came from, though my work had its own liveliness. I'm a chemist and my specialty is chemical gases, which is why I know the liveliness and movement between them. Of course, something like this couldn't compare to the general living world. And when most people are interested in the living world and not gases, I'm not the one that gets the attention. Aaron is. As much attention as Aaron got, he was occasionally envied. I must admit there have been times when I've envied him, but my form of envy was different. I'm talking about the feelings I had when he and Belize were together. How did my mind wander to this love triangle while we were having our life or death meeting? It's just human nature. My emotions rocketed in a matter of seconds. The matter of staying alive awakened my simplest, most basic human state. To get back to the meeting, the first thing about Aaron that caught our attention was how calm he was. There you go, another reason to be envious. He cleared his throat and started the speech. It seemed like he had prepared before, speaking with great care and using emphasis in all the right places. With information we have attained from the Supply Productivity Department, everything we have been going through is in direct relation to the famine period we're currently in. If it must be put into simpler context, you already know plants dying was our main problem, and the source of this problem is a new type of plant. Voices started rising. People must have been asking each other, what does that even mean? Or what new plant? Aaron, with a small hand movement, stopped all the murmuring and grumbling and continued. This isn't caused by the storm itself. He took a quick pause. I understand that he was trying to pick the right word. He finally made up his mind. This change. I couldn't resist it. I butted in. You mean the mutation? I said, "Stop it. Let's just use the actual name without being afraid of it." "Okay, mutation." It was easy to get him to accept it because he didn't care about my outbursts. He was more interested in continuing his speech. He continued quickly. "What I'm trying to say, everyone, is the source of the mutation isn't the storm. It's the plant's dust." Mixed with the murmurs, Aaron raised his voice and continued. "We haven't noticed them till now because they only become active with powerful storms. But this is the situation. It's the plants themselves that have created this effect." The murmurs had turned into background noise. It was clear that no one had noticed any new plant species. Aaron, however, knew of all the new species because of his job. Their first studies had been on desert plants because of the drought. He had found almost antique seeds and managed to grow them into an alternative food source for the people. This is what had made his department rise so quickly and make him a respected person of science. That's why no one except him noticing a new species of plant was normal. But we were still surprised. We were a generation that believed plants that harmed people were only in science fiction novels. We were so used to going about life believing that everything was there for our well-being. But as it turns out, we were dreadfully wrong. We didn't need a gang of aliens trying to rid us from the planet. It seemed the planet itself was trying to get rid of us. "Did you study this plant? We know what type of properties it possesses?" It was Sevda that spoke. She focused on finding a solution, not on the problems. I think she could be the most logical person on our planet, and the question she asked proved that. Let's see how Aaron was going to answer this. Yes and no. Our discovery of the plant is relatively new. Sadly, we didn't think it would become active in such a short time. No matter how fast we work, we can't be fast enough against a species like this. Ultimately, we're faced with an unknown. So I can't exactly say don't panic, but we aren't helpless. We're working, and sooner or later, we're going to determine the qualities and come up with a plan of action. Because he spoke more like a politician than a scientist, people weren't happy with these answers. Aaron, maybe for the first time in his life, was seen as inadequate at something. Well, we were all just as inadequate as at him at this point because no one knew what to do. For example, him bringing our lives into the equation had made it personal. Although we always work with things directly in relation with human life, we had never been in a situation as critical as this one. After Sevda, we were asked if we had any more questions. Someone known for their works in the meteorology department stated that they have a suggestion instead. They must have been outside the room because their voice came through the speakers. "We can work together. We as a department can determine the dates and active centers of any upcoming storms. That way you can observe the phases of the plants in these areas go through." I could see Aaron strongly nodding in approval. It seemed like one of his assistants beside him had taken over the meeting. "I've noticed that the meteorology department will begin their studies. We will continue with the directions you give us. If there are any more suggestions about the division of labor, please speak." Thus the suggestion chain began. The biggest meeting we've ever had was also moving very systematically. There was the occasional argument, voices were raised, the people started the issues left, and these moments were short-lived. Everyone was trying their hardest, very serious and solution-oriented, probably because of the severity and importance of our situation. We may be useless on our own against the storm, but that didn't stop us from feeling big, strong, and important as we brainstormed. When we finished brainstorming and slowly went outside, I felt as though I was in a different dimension. We were literally the last people left on Earth after the apocalypse. We were going to design the world all over again. It was exciting as it was ridiculous, but most of all, it was terrifying. My task was obvious. I was to observe the changes in the air. What's changing in the atmosphere after the storm? Is the reason behind people disappearing the dust? Or is it damage caused to their bodies because of the air circulation? My questions were like these, but I didn't have enough time to answer them because a short while later, when Aaron came to me and asked me to join a special collaboration with him, the matter I had to make time for change. The beginning of the conversation was fairly normal. "Marie, if it's possible, I'd like you to support my department." I was surprised, even though his request was simple. It was certain that in order to fully comprehend the changes occurring inside the plants, a chemist would be necessary, but my area of expertise was gases, not dust. I didn't understand why he needed my help. Sure, it's possible. He interrupted me. It was like he read my mind. You're going to say this isn't your area of expertise. I know. It doesn't matter. I mean, I know you're the right person for the job. You have more important qualities than an area of expertise written on a piece of paper. I was curious as to what this meant. Well, what qualities are you talking about? Well, they're actually simple things. I'm talking about things like character and a way of thought. You're brave and creative. You can make quick decisions in a changing situation. I, for example, can't change my mind very quickly, but you have a very flexible point of view. I think this is important. To be honest, I've admired this part of you. I think I was hearing a compliment from Aaron. I was naturally impressed. The world must be flipping upside down. Thank you. No, don't thank me. Of course, his annoying demeanor continued. He must have understood I was taken aback by his reaction, so he tried to explain. What I mean is there's no need to thank me. After this, we may go through a lot of things where we have to thank each other. Let's not force ourselves to be courteous after each one. When he said go through things, I got a little upset. I couldn't help it. I asked him, Aaron, there are obviously things you aren't telling us, aren't there? Things you know or think you know. Things you're afraid of. Tell me, what did you find out about that plant? There's nothing I'm not telling you. It was clear he wanted to avoid the question. When he felt my curiosity-filled eyes looking at him, he mumbled a little more. I mean, what I know so far isn't worth telling just yet. Well, there must be something you're sensing. He smiled. His smile was justifying me. His smile was appreciating me, but there was something bad hidden behind it. He seemed to be in pain. His words proved that. I don't want to frighten anyone, which is why I didn't say anything openly, but I sensed something much bigger and more dangerous than we thought. There's more than the plant's dust. We don't know what the people outside are doing or how they are, which is why we can't determine the plant's effect. That's the main problem. What we'll determine from the samples isn't clear. No matter what we do, we'll always be one step behind everything that happens in the real world. We'll go out there to collect the samples under protection, then we'll bring them back to the lab to examine them. Again, we'll be protected. We don't have human test subjects, and we can't. I understand why he needed my help from the sentence he couldn't finish. Until now, he had worked on samples of water, dirt, and air molecules brought by research teams that went outside to specific areas in protected suits and vehicles. That's how we had concluded that we were out of clean water supplies and that the foods we needed wouldn't grow in the soil, basically that we had no place left to live. Now, however, it's a different story. To accurately determine the effects of the plant's dust, we couldn't use samples. We had to be there in person, not as a scientist, but as a regular person. Aaron was planning a dangerous experiment in face of our dangerous situation, and it seemed he had chosen me. There was a reason he complimented me. Yes, I was brave. He must have thought I'd be the only one to accept what he wanted. He was right. Everyone knew I had tested the effects of many chemical gases on myself. I knew he'd be thinking, one more, one less. What he risked me for was clear, and it made sense. To save all of humanity, he was sacrificing me. Everything fell into place. I wasn't surprised, but for the first time, I felt scared. This little bit of fear is what started it all. To face real fear, I had to leave quarantine. I understand, Aaron, don't bother. I'll go to the area. You just have to tell me when and where the next storm will hit. I saw their eyes sparkle. It was clear that they had relaxed. While they couldn't dare to ask the question, I answered them very clearly. I'm ready to be your first human test subject.